Chapter 3. More Muppeteers. When Jim was 19, something terrible happened. His brother Paul died in a car accident. Jim was very upset. His own life was going so well. It was hard to believe his brother's was over. After this awful event, Jim seemed more determined than ever to work hard and make the most out of his life. Between his show and college classes, Jim had a lot to do. In puppet class, he met another student named Jane Neville. She agreed to help work the puppets, paint sets, and sew costumes on Sam and Friends. She had a zany sense of humor. Jim and Jane made a good team. In 1956, they took the Muppets on The Tonight Show, hosted by Steve Allen. It was a very popular show that aired at 11:30 at night. It was not a children's show. It was for grown-ups, but the Muppets were a hit. Jim operated Kermit, Jane operated Yorick, who gobbled up his own clothes and then tried to gobble up Kermit's leg. 2. Muppets were always gobbling stuff up in the early days. Soon after that, a company named Wilkins Coffee asked Jim to make TV commercials. Back then, most commercials were serious, but Jim had different ideas. He made funny commercials with the Muppets, and they were a hit. Jim made many more commercials for toothpaste, Chinese food, and other products. But commercials usually weren't as much fun for Jim as other work. They were all about selling, selling, selling. With his first paychecks, Jim bought his parents a color TV and bought himself a T-Bird convertible. Soon he had made enough to buy a used Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, a very expensive car. He drove it to his college graduation. All his life, he would collect flashy cars. He and Jane became good friends by now. They also became business partners. Muppets Inc. was born. Even so, Jim wasn't sure if being a puppeteer was what he wanted to do with his life. He still wanted to be an artist. He decided to put the Muppets away for a while and go to Europe. However, NBC wanted the Muppets to stay on, so Jane and a friend kept it going. Jim traveled in Germany, Switzerland, and Belgium, and England. He went to the puppet shows in every country. In Europe, grown-ups were interested in puppets. Puppeteers were considered artists. In America, puppets were kid stuff. By the time he got home, Jim had decided he did want to be a puppeteer after all, but a puppeteer who created shows for people of all ages. He also wanted to get married. Jim and Jane had fallen in love. They got married in May 1959. In the basement of their new home, Jim and Jane set up the first official Muppet workshop. Sam and Friends was still going strong and would last 6 years altogether, 1955 to 1961. It even won a local Emmy Award. Their first daughter, Lisa, was born in 1960. In 1961, a daughter named Cheryl came along. Jim adored his kids. He was a kid at heart himself. Once they had a family, Jane spent more time caring for the children at home. She did less performing, so Jim needed to find help with the Muppets. At puppet festivals, he met other puppeteers. Jerry Jewell was the first one to come work with him. Frank Osnowicz, Oz for short, was still in high school, but Jim hoped he would come work for him someday. Jim also met Don Salin, who later became the head Muppet builder. Jim and Don worked together very closely. For a new Muppet, Jim would think of an idea. He would doodle a quick sketch of his character on paper. In just a dozen or so scribbled lines, he would show the personality and the look of the creature. Then he showed it to Don, who made suggestions and did the actual building of the puppet. The first Muppet Don made was for a dog food commercial. It was a brown dog whose name was Ralph. All through his career, Jim had a knack for hiring talented people who worked well together. Even when business people and lawyers joined his company much later, he made sure they got along with his creative crews. Most people who worked with Jim liked him. He was so energetic that others caught his energy. He enjoyed and respected creative people. He didn't try to squash ideas just because they weren't his. People often stayed to work with him for years or even decades. That's the end of Chapter 3. Tune in for Chapter 4 by clicking on the link.